Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to another inquiry series, A Way Through, with Michelle Terrill-Heath, the author of A Parkinson's Love Story, Your Wildest Dreams, A Parkinson's Love Story, and we're covering just parts of her Substack as we talk about them and open them up like a Pandora's box. Today's topic is finding security through times of insecurity, which I think is a very apt topic right now, considering how many of us right now feel completely insecure with the state of the world? So we're going to dive right into it. Michelle, before we start, is there anything that you'd like to just start with? It's been a while since we've seen each other, actually. So this is really fun.
Yeah, I'll just say I'm really glad to be back here with you, and I'm really excited for our conversation. Um, they're always intriguing and always come up with some good thought-provoking ideas.
We we
So carry
definitely
on,
yeah,
dear sir.
carrying on. We're definitely are authentic here, and even though we prepare, we definitely like to keep it very off the cuff. So that's how we do it.
That's
Uh,
right.
Michelle, when I read this, the first thing that came to mind, it kind of starts off in 2004 when Andy got his Parkinson's diagnosis. And of course, that throws things for a total loop. But the first question I actually had about this was, was there a time in your adventures, which people will read in your book, that you ever felt really secure in life prior to 2004? Because your life has been a wild ride. And so let's just start off with that because a lot of the book actually is, I believe, about that, if I'm right.
You're right. You're very right. Yeah, and, I will say that well, I the defi we have to sort of define security to
That's
make
a good
sure
one.
that we're
Let's start with that. Like what is
talking about the same thing.
right.
Because, as far as feeling secure, um, yes, there were lots of times I felt secure. Um, and the security that I received is part of this blog and part of this subject really didn't come from the conventional ideas of what security means. So,
So tell us
security
so tell us what security means for you, Michelle. Like what
security for me, yeah, in the most positive sense of security that I can explain for me is feeling a sense of certainty about what is happening in my life. And the certainty can be from anywhere from um, the love relationship, the well-being of people you in your family, the health of myself or other people, the ability to feed yourself, the basic needs that we've talked about before, but just sort of shelter, uh, nourishment, and um, and the ability to live a life that allows for joy and happiness. That's what I would call security.
great.
And
That's a good answer.
and if any one of those things is compromised, it doesn't mean that you have no security, but it does mean that something's compromised and there's a little bit of a threat to that well-being. I would say security is well-being, and well-being comes from all those things I just mentioned, plus more. And for different people, it can be different things.
That's incredible. And I would go back to maybe saying that, like, going back what the definition of security is, there are people who live very nomadic lives, who
Yeah,
live on the land, who don't have a proper house maybe to themselves, or things that
yeah,
would make other people secure, who are indeed very secure. And I'd say, Michelle, from what I know about you, you grew up in a very secure way. You
yeah,
had a family that you knew what security felt like. And
mhm,
maybe security is more of a feeling than the tangible things around you. You mentioned nourishment and food and those things, and those are basics for sure. But just so we lead into this idea of how you find security through insecurity, I just want to
yeah,
come up with a definition of it. And if you had security prior to this moment in 2004. So now we're in
yes.
2004. This is what you brought the
Yep.
subject up. And Andy's been diagnosed. And that, let's just go right there because I'd like you to get a little bit vulnerable because we don't really talk about that moment really in these
Mhm.
conversations. Can you just unpack for us like what that was like for other people too who might just be getting a diagnosis right now so that they can
Yep.
relate it?
When Andy got diagnosed, it was very scary because, first of all, um, I knew nothing about Parkinson's disease. It wasn't something that I'd grown up with or was in my family or had any idea about what it meant. And so I got information about that, as did Andy, from the doctors that we were seeing at the time, and also from the internet, and also from other people who felt compelled to share their experiences with us. And none of the people who felt compelled to share their experiences with us had had positive experiences with Parkinson's. It was always like, my mother-in-law had Parkinson's, she was incontinent and insane, and it was the worst experience of our life. Or somebody once told me our neighbor got Parkinson's, and within 6 months they were in a wheelchair, and within 3 more months they were dead. And so the doctors would say, well, they were a little more positive, but not that much more. And so, um, the feelings of insecurity were magnified because of the information that we happen to be receiving.
Mm.
I believe there's a lot more positive information about Parkinson's through, like, the Davis Phinney Foundation, the Michael J. Fox Foundation, through us,
The
through
Michelle Terrill-Heath book that
the
every
Michelle Terrill-Heath, and team and group, and, but our job now is to get that out, and so that people don't become overwhelmed with the insecurity of the time, which it is, you're faced with losing everything that you have counted on since you were born.
But what
Your
would you say
ability.
to those people? Because I mean, if I was say I had a bad experience with a disease and I wanted to warn you about it, I mean, wouldn't
Yeah.
you, if I was the devil's advocate here, wouldn't I just say, "Hey, Michelle, I'm just preparing you for the worst." Uh,
Mhm.
and do you think that's helpful to be prepared for the worst?
Not really. I really don't, because nobody knows that you're gonna have their experience. I think it could be helpful to say, "Michelle, I had a really rough time with my experience with my spouse with Parkinson's, or my mother with Parkinson's, or my whatever. Do you wanna know that? Do you wanna hear my journey?" Because and I might say, and then I have the option. But honestly, what it felt like was more like being under attack, because the actual information that we were given um, was not that scary. It's like, well, you usually don't die of it, you die with it. There's a certain amount of disability that happens over time, but it's gonna take a long time. And, but then when you start hearing things from people and also on the internet, like, I did have a veterinarian guy tell me, "Don't ever use Doctor Google."
I think these are tips that we're gonna have to put into a way through, say, like the series, the
Like,
round table we're about to host in November. So if anybody's,
yeah.
we're working on a
Don't ever use Doctor Google, because
don't use
Doctor
Dr.
Google
Google.
is not gonna help you find security when it's very insecure times.
And something that came up to me really recently too is personalization in healthcare. And that is, maybe you could tell people like, hey, that's great that that's been your experience, but please recognize, just like pregnancy, that everyone's pregnancy is different, everyone's labor is different, everyone experiences these things differently. So
Yeah.
maybe that could be a projection. I already put your warning, but you know what I'm saying. So it's a
I
personal.
think that's a great analogy, honestly, because there's so many women I know who were always told their whole life that, their birth was that their mother had such a horrible time and almost died, and it was just so hard, and they were in labor like 78 hours, and they were like all this stuff. Um, and honestly, that doesn't really prepare somebody for the most positive of experiences. And, you know,
So this is
I
great.
don't know, like, just think if you are starting a new business. Just think of this analogy. And let's say you're starting a new business and you're gonna put your well-earned money and time into it. And t is it gonna be helpful for you, for people at that moment while you're starting this new business, to say, "You know what? You might lose everything you have. You might lose everything, you might be bankrupt, you might be below bankrupt, you might this might be the worst thing you ever did." And you're sort of like, "Well, but I'm just starting out, and maybe my experience won't be like that."
It feels a bit like the human condition for us to like news, for instance, to, oh,
Yeah.
turn to fear, because that limbic response, of course, that flight or freeze or flee,
Yeah.
active. And so what I love about the Substack that you've written is that you really get us into sort of that neocortex, into that sort of Alan Watts, if we can talk about that mind-blowing video that you shared, which was
Yeah.
wonderful. Why did that I mean, aside from the fact that Andy had shared this book with you, and of course Andy has shared Alan Watts to the whole family, and we're all
Yes.
infected by Alan
Alan Watts,
Wattson's,
share person.
I guess, Lord, by Alan Watts in my Substack. So um why did this video blow your mind? Because you said mind-blowing video. What did it bring
Yeah.
to you? What would it
Thank you
bring
for
to
that. It blew my mind because it so graphically explains the healthful way of living and the way to process life in a way that is healthful and is helpful as well towards living joyfully and happily. And as much as people say they want to do that, a lot of people do not really do what they say they want to do. And when he explains it to do with music, it just cracks everybody up when he says, you know, if your only point is to get to the end, then why bother with the rest? And then if that was the case, like in music, they would just have one crashing chord at the end and they would not have the whole rest of the symphony. And you're kind of like, oh, yeah, that's right. And then so he gives these graphic examples that we can all relate to that really help me understand that it is the journey. And so if the journey's tough in the moment, that will change in time. Um, but the tough part of the journey isn't gonna stay the same. It's always gonna change. And so if you can keep your heart a little bit open to that possibility of change, then it'll even probably happen sooner rather than later. And and even in the toughest times, Alan Watts made me think, why do we have such strong preferences? Why do we hate washing the dishes and doing the laundry? And we love, like, I don't know, laying on the beach and you know, hanging out somewhere. What's the big deal? Like, you wash a dish. Is it really that horrible?
easy answers for you? It's called dopamine, serotonin,
Yeah.
oxytocin,
Yeah.
um this is great because, Michelle, what I really want to ask you, and I think what is a burning question for me personally, and maybe some people listening right now, is making those hard decisions. Because, you mentioned Alana was going off to school since she was ending ballet. You were leaving Chicago. A lot was in flux. How did you not get paralyzed? Many of us, myself included, get super paralyzed in transitions and with difficult news and
Mm.
cannot make decisions. So is there a hack, because you were able to really mobilize not just yourself, but the family in order to make decisions that would get us to move forward in a time when many of us might just capitulate and go hide in a cocoon? Um, how did you make those decisions? Why did you make them? What was it, just brute force, or
Yeah.
what?
I think there's 2 things I'll share. One is, from Andy, which is quite appropriate. And Andy always would say to me or to his brother or to family or friends or whoever who was having a rough time in life, like was in one of those moments of like a disease or things aren't working or a rough moment. And he
Panic.
would always just say,
So,
huh?
panic. I'm saying like, I would
Panic.
imagine
Yeah.
most people who get diagnosed with a Parkinson's or who are in your
Yeah.
shoes would panic.
Yep. And Andy would say, okay, go ahead. He would just move it into a different level of understanding. And he would say, yeah, go ahead. Panic is going to be suffering. And you can suffer as long as you want. And when you're done suffering, you will change. And so, and if you don't change, you will suffer more. And I'm with you either way. I love you. I'm with you. If you suffer, I'll be with you. But I'm not going to suffer because I want to change. I want to do something differently. And so that was always in my mind because Andy was such a teacher to me. And so when we got into that panic mode, that was one of the things that was top in my mind is like, all right, this is pretty horrible right now and considering all these things. And so uh I'm not going to sit in it. I'm going to change. and let's go home, let's regroup, let's see what is possible, let's get more different information, all that stuff. So uh that's the one thing. The other thing is I happen to apparently be one of those very few people in the world that grew up with a more functional, less dysfunctional family. Not that my family didn't have some dysfunction or some problems. It's not that. But my family always stayed together and worked things out together. And I never was ever abandoned. And I think that in addition to that suffering piece that I just explained, I believe that my feelings of what is the opposite of not being abandoned? I don't know how to say it in a positive way, of always being
Sticking with it.
held.
Sticking with
Mhm.
it. Yeah, I would say sticking with it. I don't know, I mean,
Yeah, I was never abandoned. And so that, I believe, gave me the foundation to be able to not abandon myself or Andy in that situation, or our kids, you, Brendan, Alana, anybody, and just go, um, I don't know how this is gonna work out, but we're gonna work it out together. And that is exactly what has happened and what continues to happen, Sky.
yeah, that's amazing, Michelle, and there's definitely a fortitude there that you show. I can witness it in my whole life with you. You just definitely know how to show up, and not shy away from a lot of these really difficult conversations, difficult moments. Um, it's certainly I witness the miracle of that. So anyone,
And I don't have the fear of abandonment, where a lot of people, most people do, I think.
I think
And
so.
so because I don't have that fear, that is like it is a little bit like a superpower
It
in
is.
those type of situations.
And I know you are a human being, even though we like to
Of
elevate
course.
on this pedestal, but it's
Mhm.
there's definitely a sense of powerlessness, I think a lot of us feel, those of us who've been abandoned, because you if you have been abandoned, your immediate feeling is that the system or the functioning parts around you, you have no control over, and so you just are like, "Well, I have no power, so
Right.
I just give up because there is nothing I can do." So I wanna go into that for a second because you did do some certain things in this moment, you were able to move forward, and you mentioned this in the Substack. Would you just kind of highlight some of the things that you did to meet this moment in 2004 to find security in the time of insecurity? Because I know that you
I
mentioned
think a I think a big part was communication and letting people know our situation and not hiding it. We did hide it at first, and I write about that because we didn't really understand what it was. We didn't really know yet, and that we needed some time, and I think most people need some time to kind of wrap their mind around what is going on. Then, um, then we communicated with people who could help us. We communicated with everyone in our family, friends, and and then, I was just writing about this, and then, the security that we had stayed, but we did not have financial security. And and so I got to work. I, like, worked insanely, and, uh and I did that for a long time. And it didn't exactly resolve the problem, but it bought us some time because I I mean, I remember feeling like a crazy person because I would never stop working. I was doing massages constantly, I was building jewelry, I was doing art shows, I was doing everything to make money. I was teaching yoga classes. I was doing everything to make money that I could in my wildest mind do, and it was never enough. However, that it was it was much more empowering than not. It was much more empowering for me to do that. So it's communicate with people, work, and then it's something that we've talked about before that's kind of it's a tough one. It's called actively waiting. And you do what you can do and then you wait for things to shift.
Mhm.
And boy, that's not easy to do. And often it doesn't shift quickly enough. People die, terrible things can happen, you know, but that I would be say that would be
Days of
what I
just
do. Communicate, work,
and
and wait.
and actively waiting. That's great. So that's and just recently too, I've been working a lot with these two concepts of helpful and harmful. Is it helpful? Is it
Mm.
harmful? Um, so that's been something that kind of comes up now too. It's sort of like, I'm working now. Is this helpful or is it
Yeah.
harmful? I'm actively waiting. Is this, I guess what's serving me is kind of an interesting thing I'm taking from this because that's the
Yep.
hard part, I think, for a lot of us to be in discernment of what is serving us in the moment of insecurity
And
is
if you're one like me who learns by trial and error, it's not, you can only do it and try and see.
exactly. But you definitely have a checklist of what's helpful and what's harmful, I'm sure, right?
Yeah.
By a
Yeah.
trial and error, as you said.
Yeah.
So, well, Michelle, is there anything else before we close that you'd like to just leave the listeners with about, any practical information or things that would be simple and relatable about, the logistics?
If you find yourself in the situation of feeling insecure, read Alan Watts' book, The Wisdom of Insecurity. Or if you're not a reader, go online. Don't do Dr. Google, but do Google Alan Watts' analogy of life to music and dance, and watch the uh, watch the little video or the things that come up, because I really think that that will uh, really be a good thing for anybody to hear.
That's amazing. If I can build off that, there was that Native American, thing that I shared with you, and I can't remember all of them right now, but it's usually Native Americans will say they'll ask you, like, "When did you last sing?" "When did you lose your ability to sing? When did you lose your ability to dance? When did you lose your ability to look at the stars or the earth and find
And
pleasure?"
feel that.
Equal something.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Mhm.
there are some simple things I think in that wisdom that's very grounding. Um, Thanks, Michelle, so much. This is a topic that I think a lot of people are really struggling with right now. So you're with us, and I think if anybody wants to reach out to you or leave
Mhm.
comments on this about things, just share some tips with us that you guys have helped maybe about that got you through times of insecurity, or questions for Michelle because she's a great oracle and a great human being to talk to about these types of things. So like, subscribe, share, all those good things. They really do help us feed the algorithm fairies, and we're so grateful for joining us again. We'll be back again in a couple of weeks. Thank you so much, Michelle.
Cute sky.